We're going to be just as brutally honest in these running back rankings as we were with the wide receivers, but I'm doing everything I can to get us ready for week 12 and to win championships. So make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first tier, McCaffrey and JT always are going to be in the top two, but this is one of those rare weeks I do prefer McCaffrey if I had to choose between the two, and it's completely based on matchup, of course. Christian McCaffrey has a little bit of a revenge game narrative, and of course, it's been years since he's been a Carolina Panther, but I do still believe that there will be a lot of work headed his way either way because they can't help themselves. They always give him work. But I just like the matchup better with McCaffrey than I do with JT this week. I think Jonathan Taylor and the Colts coming off a bye week, obviously that's a great thing. But the one thing that concerns me, and I've been discussing it all week, is the fact that I think Kansas City in a must-win position can make Daniel Jones turn into a werewolf in this game. So I do think it's one thing to watch out for. Maybe it's not JT's best, but of course, guys having an MVP calendar year, you can't put him lower than 2. And then Jahmyr Gibbs sneaks into the top 3 this week and the first tier to round out the tier. So he's taking on the Giants this week at home. And I said this with the wide receivers. You want Lions players after a bad loss. That's just the bottom line. And I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is in this position to where I would just prefer him over some guys that we're going to go through here in the next tier because he's on a better team and it's a great matchup he's taking on. Dropping down to our next tier, here's where we have this conversation again with Bijan Robinson at 4 and then Derrick Henry we'll get into at 5. Bijan Robinson is now on a failing team that is, it has a chance to get even uglier than it's gotten. They have no Michael Penix. Now it's Kirk Cousins. They have no Drake London either. So on one hand, you could tell me, well, just because of that, they're going to have to use him into oblivion. And to that, I would recount you and say, listen, did you see the first time that Bijan played with Kirk Cousins and without Drake London this year? That was against the Dolphins defense, which is basically the equivalent of playing the Saints. Yeah, and Bijan Robinson had his worst game. Like, that was his only true bad game he's played in fantasy this year. Is it a coincidence? I hope it is, because I do not want to see Bijan go in the tubes, because we all know he's great. And as long as he gets opportunities, he should be fine. That's why I'm still ranking him at 4 this week. But him not being in tier 1, that was a statement right there for me. Derrick Henry at 5 versus New York Jets. Listen, we're starting to get that downhill energy with Derrick Henry. He's on a winning team now. Lamar Jackson opens up more running lanes because teams have to account for his rushing upside, and this is a much better matchup than he had last week, and he actually did really well against the Browns. Against the Jets defense, they can't stop anybody. They just got trampled on by Travion Henderson this past week, so I would expect Derrick Henry to have probably one of his better games of the year. James Cook at number 6. He's going to Houston to take on the Texans, and that rounds out this tier. So James Cook, listen, the concern, I've always discussed this, is there's times where they just don't give him as much work as they should. And that's the one thing with Buffalo is that I actually don't even think it's a matchup thing necessarily, and Houston's really tough. The thing I'm concerned about is the fact that James Cook just loses volume in any particular matchup. But the bottom line remains this. The reason he's in tier 2 instead of in tier 3 is because I believe that Cook can be a guy that is just on a really good offense, obviously, with Josh Allen. And they just need to win games, and they continue to utilize him correctly. So that's always up in the air, but James Cook at number 6 in tier 2, definitely a little bit of a risk-reward situation. Dropping down to our next tier, I've actually got Saquon Barkley at number 7 this week, and it feels weird to have him back here because he really hasn't belonged the last several weeks. If you look at Saquon Barkley's game log this year, it's been a lot of gross, and I think a lot of it is being put on his shoulders because of the lack of efficiency. Listen, their offensive line just isn't the same. But this offensive line against Dallas's front 7, it could either be good or bad. Because Dallas's front 7 looked really good last week when they got Quinnen Williams and they played the Raiders. But it was the Raiders. So I do wonder if maybe that was a little bit of a false reality that we saw on Monday night, and Saquon could have a big game. So I'm actually kind of predicting Saquon has a pretty big game against Dallas' defense this week. Rico Dowdle's at 8, and Kyron Williams is at 9 to round out the tier. Now, Rico Dowdle, again, ordinarily he would be in front of Saquon, but the reality is with Rico, I've been on this for a couple weeks. He hasn't been the same player since he originally injured his groin against the Packers. I think it was like 3 weeks ago at this point. He's been playing, of course, and he still is a touchdown threat because Carolina's offense has done really well to at least get several touchdowns a game. And they're riding Rico. So opportunities are not the issue. The issue is, what does he look like efficiency-wise? This, in theory, is a great opportunity for him to get back on track at San Francisco with that trash defense this week. But I'm not convinced of it because I want to be convinced. I've got Rico in places, but I feel a little uncertain about this one because Rico just hasn't been as good as he was pre-injury. Kyren Williams at 9 versus Tampa Bay. This is Sunday Night Football, and I think that Kyren Williams is what he is, right? Like, we all know that Kyren Williams has a 25-point ceiling and sometimes 30, and I think his floor is relatively stable, but sometimes he disappoints. I mean, it's against a team that I think can be beaten, and when you look at the guys below him and the guys above him, I think he fits just right here at number 9. But I want to go back to Saquon and Rico because I am genuinely curious how many people would pick Saquon because I feel like it's a little bit of a controversial ranking right there. So I'm going to go to our site on fsroundup.com, and I'm going to start a free start-sit poll for Week 12. So I'm going to go to Saquon Barkley and then go to chat and then go to start a poll for Week 12. And I'm going to add Rico Dowdle into this one. And I want you to go vote on this one. Seriously, go vote, honestly, because I want to know what the percentage of people is that would play Saquon over Rico because I kind of have a feeling I'm in the minority on this one. It's completely free to vote, completely free to start your own poll. But if you do want access to the automatic waiver tool, which is saving people's teams this year, as well as my top 250 rankings on a weekly basis, the comparison feature, and the league sync-up feature on the site, that is with the premium subscription. And of course, if you just want to get a full team breakdown from me so we can go through trade ideas, waiver ideas, ways to make your team better and prepared to win a chip this year, you can of course do a team breakdown with me as well. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got TreVeyon Henderson at number 10. And I will just start by saying this. I love TreVeyon, and I think what we've seen is real. I think he can handle a 3-down bell cow workload. But there's a couple things here. Number one, Ramondre, I'm projecting he's back this week. He's expected to resume practicing for the duration of the week. I'm expecting him and Kayshon Boutte return to the lineup. So this ranking is aggressive because it has to do with matchup, being the best in the league against Cincy's defense. You could do anything you want on them. And then number two, this is a situation where I'm playing with fire here because I don't believe that Mike Vrabel will stick to TreVeyon as a 3-down bell cow, but I think my path here is that TreVeyon starts to take over more of the between the 20s duties. And I think that if that happens, we can get enough big plays in this type of matchup for a top 10 finish this week. Javonte Williams is at 11 and Chase Brown's at 12. So Javonte Williams versus Philly, listen, this matchup has me worried. I mean, Philly's defense is starting to look like one of the elites as well. I've consistently said there's 3 elite defenses, the Broncos, the Seahawks, and the Texans. Philly's making their case for number 4. I mean, that defensive front is brutal to play against. And I get it, the last time he played them, he did well in week 1. But this is not week 1. And this is a much different defense that he's taken on. So, of course, from a volume perspective, he's got to be here in this range. But I don't have much faith that he'll hit that upside to put him much higher. Chase Brown at 12 versus New England this week. The matchup is a little concerning as well. And there's a couple different ways you could look at it. Number one is that without Jamar Chase, Chase Brown possibly could even see more passing work than he has. And that's a lot. So Chase Brown could, in theory, be a low ranking for me this week. But on the other end of that coin, I look at it and I say, New England's defense has done very well. And against running backs too. So Chase Brown, I'm in this weird position to where I'm like, I kind of see both sides of it. I'll have him at 12 to give him a respectable amount of upside as a play this week, but also kind of mitigate risk a little bit because ordinarily I might have him higher if he was playing a weaker matchup this week without Jamar. Quinshon Judkins is at 13 to round out this tier. And listen, what we're about to go through is at the next tier, you're going to see Ashton Jeanty. And I wanted to make a point by having Quinshon in here without Ashton Jeanty because Quinshon's matchup is great. Now, the one concern I've had, and I've said it over the weeks, is that I think teams are starting to figure out all you have to do is stack the box against Cleveland, and you can eliminate the threat of Quinshon Judkins and just make Dylan Gabriel beat you. Now, this week, why I ultimately decided I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins this week is because Shedeur Sanders is playing, and I don't know if he's that much better. I think he does push the ball downfield a little better. But either way, I think that changes teams' game plans against them. So the Raiders defense, it's already a good matchup. I'm going to commit to Quinshon Judkins as a pretty high-end play this week. Now, dropping down to that next tier, Ashton Genty's at 14, and Swift is at 15. Now, we'll discuss him in a minute, but with Genty here, as I just said, the matchup for Quinshon Judkins is far better than the matchup for Genty. And versus Cleveland, this is already a really bad play. And the Browns defense, I've praised them for being the best defense on a bad team this year. But the other reality is that even against the Cowboys, which is theoretically not close to as tough as Cleveland is, Genty was kind of irrelevant. Like, it wasn't irrelevant in the passing game, but they didn't give him any carries. And that's my one concern with Genty, which has always been, I don't know how high his upside on a weekly basis is. I do know his floor is pretty safe because either way, whether it's rushes or pass attempts, he will get enough volume to be in this range, but I can't put him much higher, especially against a tough matchup. DeAndre Swift at 15. Listen, Swift is kind of what he is, but I still feel like I might be shortchanging him. And I'm getting a little bit more weary over the weeks as my Nunn guy continues to carve out a role in this offense. But it is against Pittsburgh. I do think that matchup is opportunistic. And Swift, again, I do think from a volume perspective belongs in the 15 to 20 range. Because I do believe he can break off big plays depending on matchup. Last week, Minnesota was a tough matchup. This week against Pittsburgh, this offers much more upside. So I've got him decently ranked this week, I think. Breece Hall at 16, and Woody Marks is at 17. So Breece Hall gets to play the Ravens this week, and we all know what Breece is, right? An extremely talented player who can easily have a 30-point game, really against anybody. I mean, that's the fact, is that he's always due for that type of week. It just is a matter of if their offense can do anything with the ball. And against the Baltimore Ravens this week, they're coming off a long week. Baltimore is going back home, so maybe it's even Steven, but I will say this, there is an opportunity there that I could see Breece Hall having a solid game. And then Woody Marks at 17. This is a little bit weird to me. I was kind of not off, but I was worried about Woody Marks last week because of the offensive coordinator's comments that he had made after that game where he basically took everything against the Jags when they were trying to mount a comeback. So when you look at this past week, that really tells the story, though. Like, he dominated in snaps, dominated in work, compared to Nick Chubb in a close game throughout the entire game. So I do think against Buffalo this week, opportunities there against Buffalo's defense, potentially get a lot of pass-catching work, and I do think that there is a lot of merit here to consider him a running back 2 moving forward. Travis Etienne lands at 18, and I know that sounds weird, but same with Jaylen Warren at 19. Now, the last 3 guys, there's going to be a lot of discussion, I'm sure. Travis Etienne, listen, if you didn't watch the game, and I watched that on Monday, there was a fact here, and Bashul Tutin was kind of the running back 1. Like, he was their lead back, and maybe it was the case of ride the hot hand, but until Tutin went down, Travis Etienne was sparingly used. So I do wonder if Tutin plays, what does that workload look like? Now, we don't know if Tutin's going to play or not. He's dealing with injury. At Arizona, there is an opportunity there to take advantage of matchup, but I'm a little worried about Etienne moving forward. Jaylen Warren at 19. Of course, I'm worried about him from the injury perspective. And I said this in the rest of season running back rankings. I love Jaylen Warren as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but I have to look at reality here. This is a guy I'm not sure is built for a 3-down bell cow role. And I think that's why Kenneth Gainwell has had involvement on a relatively consistent basis all year long. At Chicago, there is an opportunistic kind of flavor to this matchup. So I do think Jaylen Warren, if he plays, could be a good play, but we're still up in the air on what if he plays at all. And if he does play, what does his workload look like? Bucky Irving makes his return inside of the top 30 rankings, and he lands at 20. So lots of moving parts here. First of all, we don't know if Bucky's coming back for sure or not. I'm projecting he comes back this week after completely practicing all week last week in a limited fashion, but he still practiced. I do still think that we will see some Bucky Irving action this week. Now, whether or not Bucky Irving takes the full load of the backfield, that's factored into this ranking right here, because I'm not sure he will. Bucky Irving, all I know is the 2 seasons he's had in the NFL, both times where he's gotten a full workload, he's been injured because his, much similar to Jaylen Warren's body type, is not exactly the body type for a workhorse running back. So if he comes back this week, I could see it one of 2 ways. Either 1, he's not efficient on his work, or 2, he's not the lead back, or not the full-time workhorse back. Either one's possible, but either way, that's why I've got him at 20 this week in his return. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Kenneth Walker at 21, and Emmanuel Wilson of the Green Bay Packers lands at 22. Now, Kenneth Walker is in this position to where I feel a little vindicated because of what he did this past week against the Los Angeles Rams. That was a tough defense he just put up a 20-point performance on. And I've always said this, I prefer him over Zach Charbonnet because of that big play upside. Now he gets a good matchup. And I'm kind of wondering if they realize, hey, listen, if Sam Darnold's struggling, we've got this really talented back that we could use. I'm more hopeful than I am optimistic about that one because I don't know if that's really their philosophy on offense, but I do think there's an opportunity here for Kenneth to have a second really good game. And that's why he's at 21. Emmanuel Wilson of the Green Bay Packers likely taking over for Josh Jacobs this week, and that's what I'm projecting. Josh Jacobs probably misses a game, and it's against the Minnesota Vikings, and that's the reason Wilson is not higher. Because here's the reality with this one. I probably believe that he takes the majority of the work and maybe some Chris Brooks mixed in there, but the majority will probably be Emmanuel Wilson. So I do think from that perspective, a workload perspective, he should be a little higher potentially. But this Vikings defense, people are just forgetting, this is a good defense, man. Like, that is not the problem that they've had from a team perspective. So I do worry about the matchup. I kind of feel like it's going to be a more pass-heavy week for Jordan Love and the Packers because this offense is going to have trouble moving the ball, running it. So I think that Emmanuel Wilson's fantasy upside is really tied to if he gets a lot of targets or not. And that, to me, is up for debate. Kareem Hunt is at 23 to round out this little tier here, and he's playing the Indianapolis Colts. Again, I think this matchup is interesting, because I do think that the Chiefs will play them tough. On the other hand, I actually think the Colts are going to play them really tough too. And I think it could be a more low-scoring game. But Kareem Hunt, one thing is clear. If Isaiah Pacheco misses again, and I'm projecting he will, I want Kareem Hunt. I mean, it's clear he's the lead back. There's no competition really behind him. Brashard Smith has been a nothing burger, and it doesn't look like it's getting better. We know there's always upside at the goal line, and it's kind of a lock every single week. So give me a touchdown, a couple more yards, like maybe 40 or 50 on the ground, and Kareem Hunt's going to be fine. Dropping down to our next tier. Kyle Monangai still holding strong inside the top 25, and Aaron Jones at 25. Kyle Monangai versus Pittsburgh. Like I said with Swift, the opportunity is there. There is no problem from a defensive perspective what they're taking on. The only problem is, what does his workload continue to look like? Now, I said this, I think on a live stream a couple days ago, that I think that Kyle Monangai actually has room to grow. I do think that he has room for improvement because if you look at the 2 games with Swift back, 7 carries, 12 carries. It's going up. So I do think Monangai is a guy to keep an eye on, and he is at this point where he's kind of carved out a role for himself as a goal line back, similar to Ramondre, similar to Tyler Algier, similar to Charbonnet. But I think, to me, he's the one who has more room to grow compared to those other guys. Aaron Jones at 25. He's going to Green Bay to take on the Packers in that matchup, and Aaron Jones is what he is. I think that last week what we got from him, 20-plus opportunities, that's an outlier week. I really do think that. I don't think he'll see many more games where he has 20-plus opportunities. They just can't afford to do that with him because he will get injured. He's already dealing with injury for the remainder of the season, basically. I don't feel safe about playing Aaron Jones as a top 20 option, so I've got to have him here at 25 because I know that his ceiling is relatively solid at 15, but I think that his floor is really what keeps him here because his floor is also really solid at about 10 points as well. Ramondre Stevenson is at 26 and Bam Knight is at 27. Like I said with Travion, this is a dice roll. This is a gamble of all gambles. I'm going with the fact that I think Travion remains the lead back. The lead back from a between the 20s perspective. I think Ramondre still has a role as a goal line back and probably in short yardage situations as well. So I think that he'll still get 10 to 12 opportunities on a per game basis. This is a week, though, I just don't know. I mean, the matchup is great, but I'm just telling you, I'm projecting that Ramondre takes less of a workload in his first week back. And that's why he's at 26 when Travion is all the way up there at the top 10. Bam Knight at 27, and Alvin Kamara lands at 28 to round out the tier. Bam Knight versus Jacksonville. I actually kind of think Arizona could do well from this game, because Jacksonville is traveling to the West Coast. That's a tough flight to make from Jacksonville to Arizona. So I do think Bam Knight is in position to where he could have a solid day, maybe catch the Jags a little bit off that day. And I do think Bam Knight is clearly going to be the lead back. Amari DiMercado going to miss this game. Obviously, we don't know if Trey Benson's coming back. If he came back, he would immediately be the running back one. But assuming he doesn't play, I think Bam Knight is the lead back, and he has opportunity this week to actually have more upside than this and probably around that 16 to 17 point range. Alvin Kamara at 28 to round out the tier versus Atlanta. Listen, Atlanta is just as bad as New Orleans now. I really do think so. So I think Kamara, just from a workload perspective, he's got a solid-ish floor and he's got a really low ceiling. He's not much higher than this. Like, this is basically cap for as far as how high I could put Kamara. You just wait, though. One of these weeks, he will have a massive game and people will be like, oh my gosh, I didn't start him. I will say that. Like, I don't know when it's coming, but one of these weeks it will happen, and I don't know when it will be. But I've got to have him at 28 here for now and not much higher. Dropping down to our last tier with two guys. Bashul Tutin makes his original debut in the top 30, and David Montgomery is at 30. Bashul Tutin, like I said with Travis Etienne, I do think that Bashul Tutin was the running back one in that game, and he just got injured. Now, we don't know if he's playing or not, so this could be all for naught. But if he does play, I actually think Bashul Tutin has a real good place here in the top 30. At Arizona, the matchup is opportunistic. I just said I think Arizona probably could do well in this game, but I also think Jacksonville is fighting for playoff seeding too. So they're going to want to come out and try their hardest too. I think Bashul Tutin, either way, has established a role in this offense, and it's increasing. So that's the one concern I have with ETN, and the reason Bashul Tutin's on the rise of my rankings. And then David Montgomery at 30. We kind of just know what he is. Lower upside player, matchup dependent. This does feel like a matchup, though, where he could do well. So in this particular week, I'd rather play him over Charbonnet. I'd rather play him over Tyrone Tracy against Detroit, and Tyler Algier against New Orleans, and Kenneth Gainwell against the Chicago Bears. I'll take Dave Montgomery in that matchup upside, and the Lions players off of a bad week. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below, and if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings on the week, click on this video right here.